The case of Romina Núñez several years ago literally shocked the whole of Spain with its unimaginable cruelty and cynicism. The very situation in which this unfortunate young woman found herself, we can say, typical. Her husband beat her, and she kept silent, hoping that he would change. However, the denouement of this story shocked even experienced investigators who have seen everything in their practice. The victim's body was never found, only a fragment of it, which the sea threw ashore. But how did it happen? And could the tragedy have been avoided? To answer these questions, you need to understand who Romina was and why she never dared to admit to anyone in what trouble she found herself. Who is Romina Núñez? Romina Celeste Núñez Rodriguez was born in the fall of 1990 in the city of Asunción, the capital of Paraguay, and was the eldest of 2 daughters in a poor working-class family. Parents separated when the girls were still young, so their mother, whose name was Miriam Rodriguez, had to raise the children on her own. The woman had to work several jobs at once because her ex-husband did not help them financially at all and did not show any interest in the fate of the daughters. When she was still a schoolgirl, Romina got a job in order to help her mother and younger sisters somehow. At the age of 17, the girl began a romantic relationship with a guy whose name was Christopher. He wooed her beautifully. They made plans for a joint future. But happiness ended as soon as Núñez learned that she was expecting a child and reported this to her lover. The young man immediately gave the chosen one an ultimatum. Either she terminates the pregnancy or they part forever. Romina deeply hurt the words of her lover, but after consulting with her parents, with whom she has always been very close, the girl decided to keep the child. Most of all, she feared that having had an abortion at such a young age will never be able to become a mother again, so there was only one way out. Christopher kept his word. He broke off all relations with the girl and was never interested in her fate and the fate of his child. Romina, at the age of 18, gave birth to a son whom she named Lucas. However, with the advent of a baby in the family and so deplorable financial situation worsened even more, money is catastrophically lacking. And mother Romina had to now support and grandson moving to Spain. Romina, depressed by the situation, she wanted to somehow correct the situation and help her family, but find a decent job with good pay in Paraguay, she still could not manage. Then the girl called her maternal aunt, who lived in sunny Spain, and the relative invited her niece to her place, assuring her that it would be easier for her to settle down here and that there were more prospects in Europe than in Latin America. Not thinking long, the girl packed only the most necessary things, and having earned an airplane ticket to Spain, went on the road. She left her 2-year-old son in the care of her mother and sister for a while, deciding that she would pick him up as soon as she found a new place to live and a stable job. In the late summer of 2010, Romina flew to Madrid and from there traveled to its suburbs, the provincial town of Alcobendas, where she settled in the house of her aunt. Romina immediately actively began to look for work, and she smiled at her luck. Attractive and sociable beauty got a job as an administrator in a hotel where she received a decent salary. Part of the money she sent home and for the rest rented a separate apartment so as not to embarrass hospitable relatives. Soon, Núñez met a man named Javier, with whom she had a stormy romance. The favorite a few years ago, just like her, emigrated to Europe in search of happiness and a better life. He was a native of the Republic of El Salvador, worked in construction, and seemed to be a serious man. However, when the girl became pregnant, the situation repeated itself. Javier was not ready for the appearance of children, but nevertheless, the couple tried to live together for a while. Unfortunately, soon after the birth of their common son, they finally broke up. The girl was again in a difficult situation because she was in a foreign country with an infant in her arms and simply did not know how to be further. For a while, she returned to her aunt's house where she was accepted and helped in every way possible. When the boy was only about 6 months old, the young mother went back to work because she could not work. But a few months later, a new shock awaited the girl. For a long time, she ignored the poor health and weakness, writing it off to stress and fatigue. However, when Romina still went to the doctor, she was diagnosed with cancer. The young woman underwent several courses of chemotherapy, lost her hair, lost a lot of weight, but overcame the insidious disease. After treatment, the girl quickly recovered. She continued to work and hid the lack of hair with the help of wigs. Romina believed that the hard trials, which she managed to steadfastly overcome, will certainly be followed by a period of happiness. She saved money and planned to take not only her eldest son, but also her mother and sister to Spain. New lover. In the summer of 2017, at an event where Núñez went in the company of friends, she accidentally met a man named Raúl Diaz Chacón. He was good-looking, able to impress others, had a serious job, and was financially secure. He liked the smiling beauty, and he became interested in her, asking mutual acquaintances. Romina also liked the statuesque beauty, and when he soon asked her out on a date, she gladly agreed. Raúl was almost 15 years older than Romina, and he worked as a leading process engineer for a large energy company. He had a couple of failed marriages under his belt and had 2 teenage daughters from previous relationships, but the girl was not intimidated by the age difference at all. As for her personal life, she had a similar situation, with the only difference being that she was raising sons from 2 failed previous affairs. It only took one date for the couple to realize that they were in love and they didn't want to part with each other anymore. Romina, overwhelmed by her new feelings, literally fluttered around telling her friends how happy she was. Her new lover gave her small gifts and pleasant surprises almost every day. He arranged romantic dates, sent flowers with touching cards, and said compliments. Romina believed that she had finally met her true love and found a man who would accept her and her sons. However, soon, the girl began to reach very unpleasant rumors about her chosen one. In particular, it was said that he was rude and even cruel with his previous spouses, and because of this, in fact, broke up both his marriages. But Núñez did not want to believe it, although she drew attention to the fact that Raúl did not maintain any relations not only with his former wives, but also with his daughters. However, a significant difference in age and the presence of heirs from previous relationships on both sides did not become an obstacle for the lovers. Just 6 months after meeting, they decided to live together and settled in a luxurious villa on the island of Lanzarote, part of the Canary Islands. This place seemed to the girl a real paradise, but her happiness lasted only a short time. From a dream man to a domestic tyrant, first-time lovers lived in threes, along with Romina's youngest son. Raúl tried to treat the child well, and the girl even thought that he would be an ideal father for her boys. She herself, Raúl, promised a long and happy life together in which she would not need anything, and he would fully provide for her and the children. The girl in love believed the words of the chosen one, and when he offered her to become his lawful wedded wife, without hesitation, agreed. But only Raúl insisted that they need time for 2 so that they could be alone and enjoy each other's company in full after the wedding. In fact, he not only did not want to take Romina's eldest child from Paraguay, but also dreamed of getting rid of her youngest son. However, the young mother believed her lover and did not listen to what her friends told her, who noted the strange behavior of the man. In June 2018, Chacón bought for the bride and her child tickets to Paraguay and 1 return ticket just for Romina. When the girl flew home and told her mother and sister about her chosen one, the women were somewhat confused by Raúl's behavior. They doubted the sincerity of his intentions and assumed that he just wanted to get rid of someone else's child in his house. But the girl was offended by such talk, and she even had a little quarrel with her loved ones. A few days later, she flew back to Spain, promising that in the fall, she would fly back for the boys. When Romina returned, a warm welcome awaited her, and for 2 months, she was perfectly happy alone with Raúl. However, in August, just a few days before the wedding, a man brutally beat Romina. This incident was a real shock to her, but the groom literally on his knees begged her forgiveness, promised that such a thing will never happen again, and she believed him. Núñez did not file a police report on her lover and did not tell anyone about what happened, and on August 10th, making up bruises on her face, she went to the wedding with the man who would soon take her life in cold blood. One last trip home. 2 weeks after the wedding, the girl flew back home to Paraguay, not to pick up her sons as she had planned earlier, but just to see her family. Her mother and sister were quite puzzled by the changes that had happened to her in the short time they had not seen each other. Romina looked upset and even lost. She had a noticeable limp, and there were bruises on her neck, which she tried to hide with a scarf. To all questions, Romina either kept silent or claimed that she had accidentally injured herself. Romina spent almost a month at home, which also surprised her relatives as she had just gotten married. However, the newly married wife said that her spouse himself suggested that she visit the children because she had not seen them for a long time and missed them very much. Then Miriam even praised her son-in-law for his generosity. But still, the woman did not understand what was going on and why her daughter looked so unhappy. In mid-September, Romina, secretly from her mother, borrowed money from relatives for a return ticket to Spain because her husband simply refused to pay for her return. This should have been a clear signal that flying back was not worth it. But Núñez still hoped that everything would work out and the marriage would be happy. On September 17th at the airport, her mother, sister, and son saw her for the last time. The mysterious disappearance of a mother of 2 children. Since returning to her husband, Romina's life every day more and more resembled a terrible dream. Raúl, as it turned out, used illegal substances, and now he stopped hiding his addiction from his chosen one. Being under the influence of illegal substances, he turned into a real beast and literally tortured his wife. But every time she tried to leave him, the man promised to stop and swore that this would not happen again. Usually after the beatings and threats, there was a temporary lull when the husband became loving and caring again, gave gifts and arranged romantic dates. But such periods became shorter and scandals with manhandling occurred more and more often. Shortly before the new year, Romina confessed to her best friend that she is afraid of her husband and believes that one day he may kill her. On December 29th, Raúl again beat his wife, so much so that she was forced to seek medical help. The hospital suspected something wrong and wanted to call the police to record the fact of beating. But at that moment, her husband appeared in the department and said that Romina had fallen herself and there was no need to involve law enforcers. The girl only confirmed his words and, refusing hospitalization, went home. On January 1st, 2019, Miriam, Romina's mother, tried to call her daughter several times, but she did not pick up the phone. Then the woman dialed her spouse's number to find out what was wrong, but there was no answer either. After several days of silence, the mother-in-law sent Raúl a message in which she wrote that she was going to go to the police. This time, the son-in-law reacted instantly and called back, saying that he and Romina quarreled on December 31st, after which she packed her things and left him. The man assured that everything is fine. Soon, the wife will cool down and return because before, according to him, this has already happened. But Romina's mother was not convinced by the words of her son-in-law. She felt that something had happened to her daughter and insisted that Raúl went to the police. Only on January 8th, under pressure from relatives of the wife, Raúl still filed a report on the disappearance of his wife. However, this time he told a slightly different story, adding that after the quarrel, his wife had taken his money, and he thought that Romina might have flown to Paraguay to visit the children, so he was not particularly worried until his mother-in-law called him yesterday. What is Raúl hiding? Raúl was constantly confused in his testimony and contradicted himself, which caused a lot of questions and suspicions. Then the law enforcer seriously decided to take him seriously as well as to find out how the couple's life had been. Having questioned friends and relatives, they realized that not everything was not smooth in this marriage. Romina repeatedly complained to loved ones about her husband's abuse but never went into details, and others often noticed bruises and abrasions on her body. It was decided to put Ciccone under secret surveillance, and all his telephone conversations were tapped. But the man seemed to sense that he was being watched and for a long time behaved extremely cautiously, not giving any clues or reasons to suspect himself of anything. Nevertheless, the investigation continued, and soon it became known about the visit of Núñez to the hospital on December 29th with signs of serious beatings, and how her husband almost forcibly took her away from there, forbidding her to go to the police. And a few months earlier, Romina did file a domestic violence report but withdrew it the next day. A week later, Raúl calmed down a bit and in a telephone conversation with his relative who worked in the police, blurted out that his wife was no longer alive, but her body would never be found. This was a good reason for the man's arrest as the main suspect in the case and his detailed interrogation at the station. The suspect's version of events, according to Raúl, His wife had had too much to drink on New Year's Eve and began to scandalize him, demanding that he immediately move her children into their home. And when he said he was not ready for that, she threw a tantrum, started fighting and throwing at him everything she could get her hands on. Then the man allegedly left the house for a couple hours until everything settled down. And when he returned, he found Romina in the bathtub without signs of life. According to his version, the woman suffocated because she was very drunk, but he was afraid that he might be suspected of involvement in her death or even accused of murder. So Raul decided to remove all traces and then report her disappearance. But the way he admitted he had disposed of the body shocked everyone. Sackham said that he decided to burn the woman's body on a barbecue in the courtyard. And since they lived in a luxury complex with a large surrounding area, the neighbors could not see what he was doing outside his house and could not smell the odor produced by the burning of human flesh. However, Raul miscalculated because the barbecue did not work on the principle of a crematorium, and in a few hours the remains were not burned. Then he took them out of the fire, divided into parts, packed in different bags, and a couple of days later rented a car, which took the dismembered body in the wild and deserted part of the island where he threw into the sea from the rocks. The search for the body and evidence police spent weeks combing the shoreline in and around the areas where Raul said he dumped bags of his wife's remains. Divers were also involved in the search for body fragments on the bottom, aviation, and a considerable number of volunteers. But all efforts did not bring any results. Meanwhile, on January 16th, Romina's husband was formally charged with domestic violence as well as the murder of his wife. This came after his home was thoroughly searched using specialized equipment and luminol, which revealed numerous washed-up traces of blood in various rooms. It was also found that the man had been ordering caustic soda used to remove organic contaminants and paint from the internet. As it turned out, in one of the rooms on the second floor, he was so thoroughly mopping up a bloody stain on the flooring that he damaged it and decided to paint over it. According to the version of the investigation, it was in this room that the suspect dismembered the body of his spouse. Moreover, there on the floor was found a broken fragment of Romina's fingernail with traces of blood and Raul's epithelium, which could indicate that the victim was alive and resisted. Also in the bathroom, on the tiles on the wall, they found Romina's contact lens stuck on the wall, which could have gotten there from a strong blow to the face. Unfortunately, despite their best efforts, law enforcers were unable to find any remains. But at this point, the station received a call from a tourist who reported that a lung fragment had been thrown onto the beach. He could not say with certainty whether it belonged to a human or an animal, but having heard that a body was being searched for on the coast, decided to report his find to the police. Toward the end of February, an expert examination confirmed that the lung fragment found belonged to the missing Romina. Trial and conviction. Despite the evidence found in the results of the examination, Raul continued to insist on his innocence. He stuck to his initial theory that the woman had drowned herself in the bathtub while highly intoxicated. Although evidence found in the house indicated a fierce struggle, the man also said he did not use any implements or tools to dismember the body. He allegedly tried to burn it completely on a barbecue, and afterwards the remains, due to prolonged exposure to the fire, fell apart on their own, and he just put them in bags and took them away. Such a claim was untrue for several reasons. First, the body of the adult Romina could not have been placed on the fixture in his yard. Secondly, even after prolonged exposure to such temperatures, the bones could not become so fragile that they could fall apart without the use of tools. And in order to separate the lung from the body, it was necessary to open the chest, which could not be done with bare hands. The investigation failed to establish how exactly Raul took the life of his wife, but judging by the traces of struggle found in the house, it was suggested that he could beat her to death. There was also no doubt that Ciccone had dismembered her body in the very room where he later had to repaint the floor to cover the bloody traces. Raul's trial was delayed by the COVID pandemic, so the sessions were repeatedly postponed and rescheduled. During this time, Raul changed several lawyers, and under pressure of evidence, he did admit that he had accidentally killed his wife during a scuffle rather than finding her dead in the bathtub as he had previously claimed. Nevertheless, he continued to insist that she was drunk and violent. It was not until June 2023 that the defendant was finally found guilty, except that the sentence were Mina's loved ones considered too lenient. The man was sentenced to 12.5 years for involuntary manslaughter, 2 years for proven domestic violence, 1 year for causing serious bodily harm in December 2018 when Romina went to the hospital, as well as several months for abuse of the body. The case of Ariel Castro, the monster from Cleveland and his captives, is a striking example of brutal criminals hiding behind the facade of normalcy. Maniacs like Castro often appear as good, law-abiding citizens, fooling neighbors, friends, colleagues, and even close relatives who are unaware of their double lives. Unlike many, Ariel Castro was never a model family man or worker. He was a tyrant to his wife who chose to stay silent about her suffering. Thus, people around them sincerely viewed Ariel as a good-natured, friendly, and helpful neighbor. This perception shattered in the spring of 2013 when the world learned about the Cleveland monster, who had kept 3 girls captive in his home for 10 years. The revelation shook the country, particularly shocking the local residents, as the missing girls were from the same neighborhood and trusted Castro enough to accept rides from him. Remarkably, Castro even participated in the search efforts for his victims, becoming a volunteer, yet no one suspected him. Let's delve into how this criminal managed to stay hidden in plain sight, continue kidnapping girls, and evade detection. Ariel Rodriguez Castro was born on July 10, 1960 in Yauco, Puerto Rico as the third of 4 children in a poor family. His parents, Liliana Rodriguez and Pedro Castro, constantly fought and eventually divorced before Ariel started school, leaving his mother to care for him and his siblings, O'Neill, Pedro, and Benita. Struggling to make ends meet, the family moved to Reading, Pennsylvania, in southeastern USA. However, they soon moved to the neighboring state of Ohio, finally settling in Cleveland, a city that at the time welcomed migrants from Latin American countries. Pedro Castro also moved to Cleveland with his new wife and their joint children, settling nearby so the children from his first marriage could freely communicate with their father, which Liliana never forbade. Although their father willingly contacted his older children, he never helped them financially. Liliana later remarried, giving Ariel 4 more siblings. Ariel attended Lincoln West High School in Cleveland, graduating in 1978. He studied music and regularly attended church with his family, presenting as a model Christian, but was a domestic tyrant. In his teens, Ariel met a girl named Grimilda Figueroa, whose family lived across the street. They attended the same school, quickly became friends, and later developed a romantic relationship. For a long time, they lived with their parents because they couldn't afford their own place. In the early 1990s, after saving enough money, the couple moved into a house on Seymour Avenue in southwest Cleveland. This 2-story building, erected in 1890 and later reconstructed, had 4 bedrooms, a dining room, 1 bathroom, and a large unfinished basement. According to Grimilda's sister, Aletta Caballo, Grimilda complained that her life became a nightmare after moving into the new house. Ariel regularly abused her, both physically and emotionally. Grimilda believed things would improve after marriage and children, but the abuse worsened. She hid bruises and abrasions under her clothes, blaming visible injuries on clumsiness. In 1993, Ariel beat Grimilda so severely that she needed medical attention. Grimilda suffered fractured ribs, a broken nose, and broken arms after being pushed down the stairs by her husband. Despite her severe injuries, she refused to file a police report, and the incident was hushed up. After receiving medical attention, she returned to her abusive husband. Ariel remained quiet for a while, fearing police attention, but soon realized he could get away with it and continued to beat his wife. In the mid-1990s, he inflicted a head injury that caused a blood clot and an inoperable tumor. Ariel was arrested, but released a day later, as Grimilda did not press charges, and even requested his release. By the late 1990s, Grimilda, tired of the abuse, filed for divorce, secured custody of their 4 children, Aileen, Antonio, Angie, and Amelia, and moved out. Her nightmare continued as her ex-husband pursued, blackmailed, and threatened her. Grimilda sought a restraining order which was issued 3 times but revoked each time. She passed away in late April 2012 from complications related to the brain tumor. By then, her children were grown and independent, but maintained a warm relationship with their father. In the early 2000s, Ariel lived alone on Seymour Avenue, worked as a school bus driver, played guitar at city festivals, and was known as a good-natured, hospitable neighbor. Nevertheless, there were oddities in Castro's behavior that went unnoticed. For instance, he was prosecuted several times for traffic violations, including speeding and making dangerous U-turns while driving a school bus. These infractions led to fines and a suspension, culminating in his firing in early 2013 after a maneuver endangered his passengers. Ariel frequently changed musical groups due to tardiness and disrupting rehearsals and concerts. After separating from his wife, he never invited anyone inside his house, though he regularly hosted backyard barbecues. His strangeness did not raise concern. He was seen as eccentric but harmless. No one could have guessed the danger behind his friendly facade. His first victim was Michelle Knight. On August 23, 2002, Ariel decided to kidnap and imprison her. Michelle, born on April 23, 1981 in Cleveland, had a troubled youth, often ran away from home, and had a police record. She became a mother early, but lost custody of her son, who was in a shelter. On that fateful day, she was on her way to court to regain custody of her 2-year-old. Ariel, whom she knew as her neighbor and a school bus driver, offered her a ride. He mentioned having puppies at home and invited her to help find them homes. Trusting him, Michelle agreed, but upon entering his house, the kind man turned into a monster. He severely beat and assaulted her, then chained her in the basement. For days, he starved her, deprived her of water, and repeatedly abused her. She was unable to move and begged for her release, promising silence. When Michelle's mother reported her missing, the police did not prioritize her case. Years later, after the terrible truth came to light, police officers admitted that Michelle Knight's case was not a priority, and limited resources were allocated to the investigation. Firstly, Knight was an adult. Secondly, she had previously left home multiple times. Thirdly, she had legal issues. Most importantly, authorities believed she was avoiding court proceedings related to her son's custody. Michelle's relatives tried to find her through their own efforts, involving neighbors, friends, and anyone concerned. At one point, Ariel Castro even helped post flyers with Michelle's photo around the city, all while she remained a prisoner in his basement. The second victim was Amanda Berry. Castro, convinced he was beyond suspicion, decided to kidnap again in spring 2003. Amanda, born on April 22, 1986, was about to celebrate her 17th birthday, but mysteriously disappeared on April 21, 2003. She was working as a waitress and called home after her shift, promising to be there soon. However, Amanda never arrived, and neither did she appear in the following days, months, or years. As Amanda left the restaurant and headed for the bus stop, Ariel drove up with a seemingly harmless offer of a ride home. Since she had been in the same class as his son for several years, she trusted him and accepted. On the way, he deceived her into entering his house, where he brutally beat her and dragged her to the basement, where Michelle had been held captive for months. Amanda faced the same horrific fate, beaten and starved for several days. This time, he chose 14-year-old Georgina Linda Jesus, who was in the same class as his daughter Arlene and was her best friend. On April 2, 2004, 2 girls walked out of school together, talked for a while, and then each went to their homes. On the corner of West 100 and 5th Street, Gina met Ariel, who promised to take her home. She knew him since childhood, was her best friend's father, so without hesitation, she got into his car immediately. Even though it was daytime and no one witnessed the kidnapping, the streets were empty. When it became known that Gina was missing, there was no warning to Amber, making her parents angry. The story aired on the Fox television show, America's Most Wanted, rerun 2 more times in 2005 and 2006. The disappearance was linked to Amanda's kidnapping a year earlier in September. But Castro remained unsuspected. Despite this, he voluntarily participated in the search for the missing girls. He treated Gina like the other victims, keeping them imprisoned in his home. Although a passerby saw a middle-aged Hispanic man and a sketch resembling Castro was drawn, he was never a suspect. For over 10 years, he regularly beat, abused, and starved his victims to mentally break them down, punishing any disobedience or escape attempts to prevent thoughts of death. Running away. Michelle, the first and oldest victim, suffered the most, undergoing public beatings to intimidate others. Finally, he moved them from the dark basement to a second-floor room with a view of the backyard. Knight recalls that she became pregnant by her abuser at least 5 times during her incarceration. However, each time it became obvious Ariel terminated the pregnancy in the most brutal way. He starved the girl and kicked her in the stomach until she miscarried. After one of these tortures, she almost died due to severe bleeding. But even then, the kidnapper remained indifferent and did not allow calling an ambulance. The girls were allowed to take a shower no more than once a week, and that as a reward for good behavior. Instead of a toilet, they had a garden bucket, which Castro very rarely and reluctantly took out. The criminal fed the captives no more than once a day, but continued to beat and use them regularly. One day he gave the girls a puppy, but a week later, he brutally killed the dog in front of them as punishment for Michelle's disobedience. Gina, during the years of confinement, has never been pregnant. But Amanda in 2006 realized that she was expecting a child and with horror, imagined how Ariel would beat her to provoke a miscarriage. This time, however, the man was even happy about it, allowed her to carry the baby, and he bought himself an inflatable pool specifically for childbirth. In December 2006, Amanda gave birth to a daughter who was named Jocelyn. The child was born weak but still survived. The appearance of the baby is very close to the girls, who were now immersed in caring for him and a little abstracted from the situation in which they were. In addition, Castro softened considerably after the birth of his daughter and began to pamper the captives with small gifts, and sometimes allowed them to go out with the child for walks in the courtyard, but always under his strict supervision. As Jocelyn grew older, Ariel even sometimes took her to visit her mother, to whom he told her that she was his daughter born out of wedlock. The girl developed appropriately for her age. She articulated herself adeptly, a skill instilled by her mother's tutelage in literacy and numeracy. Outwardly, the child bore the hallmarks of robust health, appearing well-nourished and impeccably groomed, despite enduring years of captivity under the unyielding control of their tormentor. The girls clung steadfastly to the flickering flame of hope for freedom. Infrequent attempts at escape were made, though each endeavor exacted a heavy toll upon them. Cruy and Ariel, confident in their ability to preempt their every move, faltered fatally on May 6, 2013. Amanda seized the fleeting chance when an unlocked door beckoned, frantically alerting a passing neighbor by pounding and shrieking at a window. Though initially perplexed, the neighbor's intuition was roused, prompting swift action and summoning law enforcement to the scene. Amanda divulged her identity and unmasked the presence of 2 other captives, Michelle and Gina. After enduring a decade of captivity, all 3 were emancipated and promptly hospitalized. While Amanda and Gina exhibited no discernible health concerns, Michelle bore the heavy burden of severe physical and psychological trauma. Deafness plagued one ear, vision was severely impaired, and a litany of untreated fractures necessitated extensive reconstructive surgery. Furthermore, the scourge of abuse-induced complications left her forever robbed of the chance of motherhood. Suspicions of complicity led to the detention of his siblings, O'Neill and Pedro, both frequent visitors to his domain. In due course, the men found themselves swiftly released. On the other hand, Castro faced a litany of charges, including kidnapping, abuse, assault, forced imprisonment, and the heinous act of terminating 5 unborn lives. While the legal ramifications of these charges could have sentenced him to life behind bars, the prosecution aimed for the ultimate punishment, the death penalty, branding Castro as the Cleveland Monster. However, a surprising twist unfolded as Castro opted to collaborate with the investigation, confessing his guilt and recounting the harrowing events in exchange for a commutation of the death penalty to life imprisonment. In his chilling narratives, he meticulously detailed the days of abduction and the subsequent torment inflicted upon his victims, all the while deflecting responsibility onto the very individuals he subjected to such horrors. August 1st, 2013 marked the culmination of legal proceedings, with Castro sentenced to spend the remainder of his days incarcerated without the possibility of parole. Yet, his parting words echoed with a mix of remorse and denial, as he tendered an apology to his victims, claiming affliction rather than culpability, and casting blame upon law enforcement for their purported ineptitude in failing to uncover the atrocities transpiring right under their noses. Castro's residence met its end on August 7, 2013, reduced to rubble in a symbolic act of closure. The solemn occasion was attended solely by the kin of Michelle Knight and Gina DeJesus, with other participants of the nightmarish ordeal choosing to abstain, unwilling to revisit the site that had served as the backdrop for their unimaginable anguish. Nevertheless, amidst the rubble emerged a glimmer of hope, as on July 9, 2013, Knight, Barry, and DeJesus released a joint video, expressing profound gratitude to the public for their unwavering support throughout their journey toward reclaiming their lives. It was their only joint statement after which, despite the years spent together in confinement, the girls chose never to speak to each other again. The maniac was transferred to a correctional center in Orient, Ohio after his conviction and placed under special supervision. But on September 3, 2013, just a month after he began serving his life sentence, the Cleveland monster was found hanging from a sheet in his prison cell. All attempts to revive him were unsuccessful. He was 53 years old at the time of his death. Michelle Knight, after her release, preferred to change her name and place of residence. She did not give interviews, but a few years later published a book in which she recounted all the horrors she had experienced in the Castro home. Her child was adopted after his mother disappeared. The woman later tracked down his adoptive parents, but it is not known whether she was able to establish contact with her now adult son. Barry and Jesus received diplomas from John Marshall High School in 2015 because they never had time to graduate. Gina later volunteered on the Amber Alert Committee, and Barry joined Fox affiliate WJW in Cleveland in 2017, where she hosts a missing persons column. Castro family members disowned Ariel, condemned his actions, and apologized to his victims and their families. The perpetrator's eldest daughter, Amelia, is now serving a 25-year prison sentence for assault and attempting to take a man's life. His youngest daughter, Arlene, apologized to former best friend Gina for the way her father treated her. Castro's son, Antonio, said he had been to his father's house and saw that some rooms were locked and inaccessible, but his parent explained it was because he was saving money on heating. In 2018, Michelle published a book titled Life After Darkness, Finding Healing and Happiness After the Cleveland Kidnappings. DeJesus also wrote a book of memoirs titled Hope, a memoir of survival in Cleveland. There have also been numerous documentary projects and 2 feature films about those horrific events. Prisoners of Cleveland, which was released in 2015, and Kidnapped in Cleveland, which was released in 2021. Ariel Castro's case is one of the most horrifying cases in American criminal history. Castro was convicted of kidnapping, holding, and sexually abusing 3 women for more than a decade in his home. Castro kidnapped Amanda Berry, Gina DeJesus, and Michelle Knight at his home in the Tremont section of Cleveland. He kept them in terrible conditions, imprisoned in small rooms, and subjected to physical and mental torture. Finally, Barry managed to escape captivity by banging on the door and calling for help. She and the baby girl she gave birth to in captivity were rescued, along with DeJesus and Knight. When the police arrived, they discovered the brutal tragedy that Castro had caused. Castro was later arrested and convicted of a series of crimes, including rape, illegal arrest, and unresolved murder. He received a sentence of life in prison plus 1,000 years. However, he committed suicide in prison in September 2013, just 2 months after his arrest. This case caused a stir and sparked special interest in the issue of domestic violence and human rights protection. Sophie Sergi was a student at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks, majoring in marine biology. In December 1992, she underwent extensive orthodontic procedures and took the following semester off to recover. Sophie was on a full academic scholarship at the university but needed to work to pay for the orthodontic work and to have time to heal. She spent the early months of 1993 in her hometown of Pickett's Point, Alaska, living with her mother and younger brother. After recovering, Sophie worked 2 jobs and traveled back to Fairbanks whenever her braces needed adjustments. In April 1993, 20-year-old Sophie made another trip to Fairbanks. She took the chance to visit her friend Shirley Wadley and planned to stay the night in Shirley's dorm room on the 2nd floor of Bartlett Hall on the university campus. On the evening of April 25th, Sophie and Shirley spent time with Shirley's boyfriend, hanging out and eating pizza. Shortly after midnight, Sophie left the dorm to go outside for a cigarette. Witnesses later reported that she had smoked with a group of students just outside the dorm building. At 1:30 a.m., Sophie had not come back to the dorm room. Shirley left her a note on the door saying that she and her boyfriend were going to sleep in a different room. When she came back to her dorm later that morning on April 26th, the note was still on the door, and there was no sign that Sophie had slept in the room. Shirley called Sophie's orthodontist office and learned that she had not shown up for her appointment. Sophie's body was discovered by a janitor around 2 o'clock that afternoon. She was lying face down in a bathtub in the 2nd floor bathroom of Bartlett Hall. She had not been found earlier in the day by the students' hall. She had not been found earlier in the day by the students using the sinks and showers because the bathtub was in a private room off of the main bathroom. Sophie had been stabbed, shot, and sexually assaulted. The medical examiner estimated that she had died in the very early hours of 26th. Authorities interviewed everyone who lived in Bartlett Hall, but found very few leads. There was DNA found on Sophie's body, but no match to it was ever found in any police database over the years. A cold case unit from the Alaska State Police re-interviewed every resident from Bartlett Hall they could find in 2010, but still no arrest was made in the case. Following the arrest of Joseph James D'Angelo, the alleged Golden State Killer who was identified through genetic genealogy, the Alaska State Police decided to try the same approach in Sophie's case. They uploaded the DNA from her crime scene into GEDmatch, an open-source DNA database originally developed to help individuals research their family trees. On December 18, 2018, a forensic genealogist identified a woman who was a close relative of the contributor of the DNA. That woman was eventually found to be the aunt of 44-year-old Stephen Downs. Downs was already known to investigators. In 1993, he had been an 18-year-old student at the University of Alaska at Fairbanks and had lived in Bartlett Hall. His roommate, Nicholas Dazer, worked as a security guard and had helped secure Sophie's crime scene in 1993. When Dazer was re-interviewed by the Alaska State Police in 2010, he told them that Downs had kept an .22 revolver in their dorm room. That weapon would shoot bullets consistent with the one found in Sophie, but the markings on the bullet were too general to match it to a specific weapon, according to a state forensic expert. When he was identified as a suspect in Sophie's murder, Downs was living in his hometown of Auburn, Maine. Since 2011, he had been working as a nurse, but he had a history of poor performance and inappropriate behavior. He lost a nursing job in 2016 for a totality of substandard performance according to his record with the Maine State Board of Nursing. He was also accused of inappropriate behavior with 2 female co-workers at that job and had to complete a course on professional boundaries in nursing. Co-workers from his most recent job have come forward with allegations ranging from tampering with medications to mistreating patients. Several of his co-workers and patients reported being scared to be alone with him. The Maine State Police worked with the Alaska State Police to further investigate Downs. On February 13, 2019, they went to his home to interview him. He denied any involvement in the case, but said he remembered Sophie's face on posters that were put up after her murder and feeling sorry for her. The following day, the Maine State Police returned with warrants to collect a DNA sample from Downs and search his house. The DNA was tested and confirmed to be a match to the DNA found at Sophie's crime scene. On February 15th, Stephen Downs was arrested and charged with murder and sexual assault. He is currently fighting extradition to Alaska to face these charges. Between 1991 and 2006, a serial rapist, eventually dubbed the NorCal Rapist, assaulted at least 10 women in 6 counties in Northern California. He would force his way into victims' homes, restrain them, and rape them multiple times. He abducted some of his victims, taking them from their homes to force them to withdraw money from an ATM, which led to the infamous images of him on security footage wearing a clear mask meant for burn victims. He apparently also stalked his victims. 2 weeks after he assaulted a woman on Halloween of 1996 bearing a skeleton mask, he called the dental office where she worked. He claimed to be sorry. One of his other victims was Maki Anderson. In July 1997, she was a 21-year-old student at Chico State University. During her attack, she managed to break free of restraints the NorCal Rapist had used on her. He rebound her, but she broke free 2 more times. She then stabbed him in the arm with a pair of scissors. As was his habit, her attacker took Maki's bedsheets with him in an attempt to limit the amount evidence police had to investigate with. He left behind her pillowcase, though, and it had a sample of the blood he had lost in Maki's brave attempt to fight him off. This was just one of the sources of DNA the NorCal Rapist left behind at his crime scenes. Police were never able to find a match to it in any database, however. In 2018, the sample was entered into GEDmatch. Within 10 days of entering the sample, authorities were able to identify a suspect through one of his relatives, surveil him, collect a straw from his garbage can, test it, confirm that the suspect's DNA matched the samples from the crime scenes, and make an arrest. The man identified and arrested was named Roy Charles Waller. Waller was arrested as he arrived to work on September 20, 2018. The 58-year-old worked as a safety specialist in the Environment, Health, and Safety Department at the University of California at Berkeley. On September 21st, the university released a statement saying that Waller was placed on investigative leave and that they will be reviewing all open on-campus sexual assault cases to confirm that Waller had not been involved in them. When Waller had his first court date on September 24, 2018, Maki Anderson was sitting in the second row of the courtroom. Waller was charged with 12 counts of forcible sexual assault, all stemming from an hours-long attack on 2 roommates in October 2006. After the hearing, Maki spoke with the media outside of the courthouse. "I want him to know that he did not break me," she told them. "He did not break me, and I know what he has coming to him. He needs to be locked up until he learns what it is to be human." The original dozen charges Waller faces could put him in prison for the rest of his life. However, the original 12 charges were only in connection to the one attack in Sacramento County. On January 7, 2019, he was also charged with 28 additional offenses in connection with the crimes in 5 other California counties. He is next due to appear in court on March 8, 2019. On June 13, 1993, a woman called the property manager for her apartment in a building in the 31100 block of Pillsbury Avenue in Minneapolis, Minnesota to complain that water was leaking into her apartment. The manager determined that the water was coming from a different unit in the building and let himself into it to investigate when there was no answer at the door. He found the water was coming from the shower, which had been left running. He also found a large amount of blood and the nude body of 35-year-old Jean Childs. She had been stabbed multiple times. Jean was a sex worker who brought her clients back to the apartment she was found in, which was rented by her boyfriend. He had been out of state at the time of her murder. Police collected several items from the scene that would eventually be tested for DNA, including a blue towel, a washcloth, a red t-shirt, a comforter, and a blood stain in the sink. The unidentified DNA found at the scene was never matched to any sample in police DNA databases. In 2018, authorities uploaded the unknown DNA to a commercial DNA database and worked with genealogists to identify the contributor of the DNA. Police have not disclosed which database they used, but it does not appear to be GEDmatch, as the Hennepin County attorney described it as a genealogy company you see advertised on TV. The genealogist identified 2 individuals with the right amount of shared DNA to the relative found in the commercial database. In investigating the 2 individuals, police found that one of them had moved to the Minneapolis-St. Paul metro area in early 1991 and moved away 6 months after Jean's murder. His police record was mostly composed of traffic violations and driving while intoxicated convictions. However, he was also convicted in February 2016 for soliciting sex using the internet in 2015. In January 2019, police placed the suspect under surveillance and followed him to a hockey game. Police observed him buying a hot dog and wiping his mouth with a napkin before throwing it into a trash can along with the cardboard container the hot dog had been served in. They then collected the napkin and submitted it to the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension Laboratory to look for DNA on it. There were multiple DNA signatures on it, but one of them matched the unknown sample from Jean's crime scene. Based on this match, police arrested the suspect, 52-year-old Jerry Rustrom, in February 2019. Westrom owned and operated several businesses, including an organic corn farm in Minnesota, and was an active supporter of 4-H and youth sports programs. He is married and the father of 3 children. A direct DNA sample was taken from him after his arrest, and it was confirmed to be a match to samples taken from the washcloth, the comforter, and the blue towel from the crime scene. Westrom spoke to police after his arrest and denied any involvement in Jean's death. He further claimed that he had never been in that apartment or in that apartment complex. He said he did not recognize Jean from her picture and denied having sex with any woman in Minneapolis in 1993. He could not explain why his DNA was found at the scene. Westrom was released on bail following his arrest. His family, as well as several friends, supported him in court for his first hearing. His attorney, Stephen Meshech-Besher, has told the media that his client intends to plead not guilty. He also claims that the evidence in the case is thin and that his client's arrest was premature. Westerman is due back in court on March 13, 2019. "30-year-old Jack Upton was a popular and responsible manager at a Safeway grocery store in Fremont, California. His co-workers were therefore worried when he missed several shifts at work. On December 17, 1990, police were called to check in on him at his apartment. There, police found Jack's body beaten and stabbed to death. His 1985 Nissan 300ZX was missing from the apartment complex's lot. A week later, the car found in a mall parking lot in Thousand Oaks, California, more than 350 miles away. Police were able to lift fingerprints from inside of it. At the crime scene and in the car, police found matching blood samples that they could not identify but believed came from Jack's killer. Authorities would periodically run the DNA from the unidentified sample through databases as they continued to improve over the ensuing years, but they were never able to find a match. In 2018, the Fremont Police Department contacted Parabon Nanolabs, who used forensic genealogy to identify Russell Anthony Guerrero as a potential suspect. In October 2018, Fremont police traveled to Tempe, Arizona, where Guerrero was living, to begin surveilling him. They were able to collect a discarded DNA sample from him, which proved to be a match to the DNA found in Jack's apartment and car. Sometime after the DNA match was made, Guerrero's fingerprints were determined to be a match to ones found in the car. On January 17, 2019, Guerrero was charged with 1 count of murder by the Alameda County District Attorney's Office. On January 22nd, Fremont detectives arrested him in Chandler, Arizona. Authorities have not yet found a connection between Jack Upton and Guerrero, nor have they identified a motive for the crime. Guerrero does have a criminal record in several states. The case of Luz Maria Lopez. Luz Maria Lopez was born on March 17, 1995 in the small town of San Cristobal, Verapaz. Her family was simple and modest. Her parents were A.R. Morales and Brian Lopez. Luz Maria was the youngest of 2 children. She grew up with her older brother, Omar. As an infant, she faced a life-threatening intestinal obstruction. To save her, doctors performed a complex operation without guarantees of success. Her mother prayed fervently for her recovery and firmly believed that her daughter would pull through, and she did. The surgery at such an early age did not impact Luz Maria's development. Throughout her school years, Luz Maria actively engaged in sports, especially gymnastics and athletics. She also had a passion for classical choreography. Her creative nature made it easy for her to communicate and connect with different people, quickly forming friendships. Academically inclined towards the humanities, she excelled in her studies. After finishing school, Luz Maria contemplated higher education and opted for a prestigious state university. She decided to pursue a law degree and later specialized in criminalistics due to her genuine interest in this field. A significant moment occurred during her student years when Luz Maria and her mother visited a car dealership in Coban, the capital of Altavera Pass. It was Omar's 25th birthday that year, and they wanted to gift him something special, a motorcycle he had always dreamed of. At the showroom, a polite and attentive young consultant named Jorge welcomed them. He showed them various models and provided recommendations. Mother and daughter chose a model but wanted to consult with the head of the family before finalizing their decision. They left with a business card from the dealership and Luz Maria's phone number for future reference. Soon after, Jorge called Luz Maria, not about the motorcycle but on a more personal note. Over time, these calls became frequent until Jorge mustered the courage to ask her out for coffee. It was clear that he had a strong attraction to the beautiful, sultry brunette, but he was unsure how to initiate their acquaintance. Luz Maria also found this handsome young man appealing. When he proposed they meet, she agreed readily. Although the young man was a year younger than her, this slight difference didn't hinder their growing connection. Their romantic relationship blossomed almost immediately. Both felt it was love at first sight and believed in a future filled with happiness together. After only a few months, the couple chose to live together, despite their parents' disapproval of such haste. Soon after, they were married. Approximately 6 months later, they held a wedding ceremony, inviting only their closest friends and family to celebrate with them. However, issues arose on the day of the wedding. The banquet venue encountered a problem, which almost disrupted the entire event. The couple had to pay a significant additional amount to ensure the celebration proceeded as planned. Little is known about Jorge, Luz Maria's chosen partner. Born in 1996 in Santa Catalina Latina in central Guatemala, Jorge was the eldest of 2 sons and grew up with his brother Pablo. Their family often faced financial hardships, balancing on the edge of poverty. Thus, there wasn't enough money for luxurious clothes or expensive toys. It barely covered necessities. Despite these challenges, Jorge lacked aspirations for a better life and didn't focus on studying or securing a decent job. People who knew Jorge personally described him as withdrawn and sometimes even aggressive due to his trouble controlling emotions. Consequently, he didn't have many friends and struggled with relationships. Nonetheless, meeting his dream girl sparked determination within him. He worked hard to win her love and hurried to marry her out of fear she might change her mind. It's worth mentioning that Luz Maria's parents were skeptical about their son-in-law right from the beginning. Overall, despite some initial challenges and doubts from others around them, connection remained strong and unwavering. Something about this young man didn't sit right with them. They couldn't pinpoint it, and they couldn't convince their daughter not to marry him. Soon after the wedding, she became pregnant. Without a university degree, finding a good job was tough. Employers didn't want to hire someone inexperienced and expecting a baby, so she had to settle odd jobs. Her husband, by that time, had lost his job too, and wasn't eager to find a new one. When their daughter Alice was born, money became really tight. With both of them unemployed, they struggled to pay rent or even buy food and basic necessities. Then Jorge suggested moving in with his parents temporarily. Luz Maria Lopez resisted for a long while, but eventually agreed. They couldn't stay on the streets with a baby. Luz Maria Lopez's mother was aware of her daughter's family issues and often urged her to come back home. But Luis Maria Lopez kept saying things would get better with her husband, and there was no need to worry. One day, the mother decided to visit her daughter and granddaughter at her son-in-law's parents' house and found a distressing scene. Luz Maria Lopez was in terrible shape, eating just once a day, and that too very little. However, Jorge's family didn't see the need to provide for their unemployed daughter-in-law. It's terrible. Luz Maria Lopez was breastfeeding Alice, so lack of proper nutrition threatened both their healths. But inadequate meals were only part of the myriad problems she faced in her mother-in-law's home, as she later discovered. She was constantly humiliated by the crying of the child and the presence of items in the house. His frustration him to repeatedly throw these items at Maria. On one occasion, he launched a baby bottle that struck little Alice, who was in her mother's arms. Jorge witnessed all of this, but never once stood up for his wife and daughter, acting as if they were strangers to him. Maria's mother persuaded her to take her granddaughter and return to the parents' house. Soon after, Jorge appeared at their doorstep, asking his wife to come back, promising he would find employment. She agreed, but only on the condition that they would rent an apartment and live separately from Jorge's parents. When Maria successfully defended her diploma, she fulfilled a long-time dream by securing a job with the city prosecutor's office. A smart, talented, and responsible young woman, she quickly earned the respect of her colleagues and began moving up the career ladder. Over time, the family's financial situation improved considerably. They could even afford to buy a car for two. However, this improvement was solely due to Maria's diligent work and reputation. Jorge was still searching for himself and preferred living at his wife's expense. He was jealous, lazy, and a domestic type with an explosive temper, which worsened over time. Jorge did not want to work, taking only temporary part-time jobs, if at all. He preferred sitting at home in front of the TV, drinking beer with friends, and spending what his wife earned. Moreover, Jorge was pathologically jealous and tried to control every move of his beloved. He did not permit her to make friends or have lunch with colleagues in cafes or just be somewhere without him. Constantly checking her phone records and reading messages became routine for him. He also forbade her from registering accounts on social networks. At home, when left alone with Maria, Jorge's behavior did not improve in any way. He often created scandals in seemingly calm places, constantly clarified his relationships, and habitually blamed his wife for any problems or family troubles. When they lived at his parents' house, Jorge never stood up for his wife. He just watched as she was humiliated, insulted, and occasionally even beaten by his relatives. Jorge himself also sometimes resorted to violence and didn't see anything wrong with it. He treated Luz Maria as if she were his property, believing she would endure everything and wouldn't leave him. Neighbors frequently heard screams from their home and saw signs of beatings on the young woman's face and body. Luz Maria repeatedly tried to leave her husband and considered filing for divorce. Several times, she took her daughter and moved out to live with her parents. However, each time, her husband would go there, literally begging on his knees for forgiveness. Remarkably, each time Luz Maria forgave him and gave him another chance despite her parents urging her to come to her senses and leave the abusive man. On December 15, 2020, after another violent altercation with Jorge, Luz Maria took their 3-year-old daughter Alice, got into the car in tears, and went to her mother's house. The following day, Jorge arrived there. His intentions were unclear, whether he wanted his wife back or simply the car. He claimed he had found a job and assured everyone that their lives would change. Additionally, he promised never to raise a hand against his wife again. Surprisingly, Luz Maria believed him yet again and returned with him to their rented apartment. In mid-January 2021, Luz Maria called her mother to complain that not only did Jorge fail to secure a job as promised, but had also stolen the money she earned, effectively leaving the family destitute. Her mother felt sorry for her daughter and offered financial help so they could get by until the next salary was received. The women agreed to meet on the morning of January 19th, but Luz Maria did not arrive at the designated time. She decided to visit her daughter's workplace the next day. Upon arrival, she discovered that Luz Maria Lopez hadn't shown up for 2 days, and no one had been able to contact her. At the same time, Jorge, also searching for his wife, appeared at the prosecutor's office. He mentioned that they had argued again and thought Luz Maria Lopez had gone to her mother's house. He figured she wasn't answering because she was upset with him. The concerned mother immediately felt something was wrong and suspected her son-in-law might be lying. She went straight to the police to initiate a search for Luz Maria Lopez without delay. That same day, an alert system named Isabel Claudina, originally alert to Isabel Claudina, was activated nationwide. This emergency system was triggered for young women reported missing. When the extensive search began, Luz Maria Lopez's husband was quickly identified as the prime suspect, though it would actually be more accurate to say he was the only suspect. Luz Maria Lopez had no known enemies or reasons someone would kidnap her, and Jorge was the last person seen with her alive. Naturally, he denied any involvement in her disappearance, asserting that he himself was distraught over her absence and irritated by being labeled as the main suspect. Despite his denials, Jorge repeatedly contradicted himself during questioning and failed to provide a clear explanation as to why he hadn't informed the police on the actual day of his wife's disappearance. He claimed he believed she was at his mother-in-law's home, but didn't call or visit there. While law enforcement searched for witnesses and combed through areas for any clues, a breakthrough came on January 22nd. Municipal workers accidentally discovered Luz Maria Lopez's body while responding to a call about a clogged storm drain near a road. Upon lifting the grate to access the drain, they found an unusual large plastic bag containing something black inside. Upon closer inspection, the observers were horrified to discover charred human remains. They promptly reported this gruesome finding to the authorities. Upon arrival, the police officers speculated that the body might belong to Luz Maria Lopez, who was widely looking for her after Nationwide. Forensic experts later verified that the remains were indeed those of a young woman. Her parents and brother, despite the severe disfigurement caused by the fire, confirmed her identity with certainty. What's coincident is that the package containing her remains was found on the same street as the prosecutor's office where she had worked. This location lacked surveillance cameras and lighting. Despite how badly burned the body was, pathologists determined that she had been severely beaten before death. The cause of death was asphyxia, indicated by internal hemorrhages, multiple fractures sustained while she was still alive, and particles of dried blood in her nose and mouth. Additionally, there were deep marks on her neck pointing to strangulation. At the time of discovery, no new suspects had emerged in the investigation. The victim's parents firmly believed that their son-in-law had brutally murdered their daughter. Consequently, Jorge was taken into custody, while authorities examined his motive for committing such a heinous act. In addition to the investigation, psychologists and criminal analysts needed to scrutinize the marriage and family dynamics closely. During these proceedings, Ms. Lopez submitted a disturbing audio recording sent anonymously by a neighbor familiar with her daughter's household. This person had frequently witnessed domestic disputes between Luz Maria and her husband, but decided to record one such incident without realizing it would culminate in murder. The audio captured Luz Maria desperately crying for help amid little sobs in the background. Ms. Lopez was horrified by what she heard and lamented that if this witness had alerted authorities earlier, her daughter might still be alive today. The individual who captured the recording did not contact the police, nor did they the residence from which the distressing screams emanated. The authorities were unable to trace this anonymous person, making it impossible to involve them as a witness in the investigation. Consequently, the audio recording was included in the criminal materials. A key witness gave a detailed interview, urging all citizens to stay vigilant and report incidents of domestic violence to the police rather than merely documenting them with devices such as cameras. This approach, she stated, could potentially save lives. This crime triggered significant public outrage, Stella, prompting 1,000 to take to the streets in protest, demanding that the perpetrator be brought to justice. Jorge was promptly taken into custody, but persistently denied any wrongdoing. He claimed he personally drove his wife to work on that ill-fated day when she subsequently vanished. Street CCTV footage indeed captured their vehicle heading towards Luz Maria Lopez's workplace that morning. However, due to tinted windows, it was indiscernible how many individuals were inside. None of the video clips showed the car stopping or Luz Maria exiting. Further discoveries were uncovered at the couple's rented home, where faint traces of cleaned blood and drag marks were detected. These findings suggested that a violent crime likely occurred there. An additional piece of evidence came when microscopic fragments of burnt flesh were discovered in the trunk of their family car. Moreover, during their search, investigators paid close attention to a recent purchase made by Jorge and his wife, a double orthopedic mattress. It wasn't so much about the mattress itself, but rather its dense polyethylene wrapping, which analysis revealed had been used to transport Luz Maria's burnt remains. Additionally, several neighbors testified about having repeatedly heard Jorge verbally abusing and threatening his wife with death just days before her sudden disappearance. Her husband had shouted that he would kill her if she decided to leave him, and that he would hide her body so that no one would ever find it. Based on the data collected by expert criminologists, as well as the testimony of several witnesses, the investigation presented a gruesome picture of the crime. The murder occurred on the night of January 19, 2021. The day before, the couple had a big fight, and Jorge once again resorted to violence with his fists. He had previously had issues with his temper, but this time he went into an uncontrollable rage. He struck his wife multiple times, causing her to scream and cry for help. These screams were heard by their neighbors, but nobody called the police. During the beating, Jorge broke his wife's nose and caused a head injury. After this brutal assault, he strangled her with his bare hands and then attempted to dispose of the body. He dragged it into the backyard, doused it with campfire liquid, and set it on fire. However, Jorge did not anticipate how smoky and foul-smelling the burning flesh and hair would be. Concerned that neighbors might notice and call the fire department or police, he quickly extinguished the fire. He wrapped the charred remains in plastic and sought a secluded location, where he believed the body would never be found. The most horrific aspect was that Jorge committed these acts in front of their young daughter. Despite her tender age, she somewhat comprehended what was occurring. The child, 3.5 years old at the time, witnessed both the beating and subsequent murder, as evidenced by her cries and screams, which were also recorded. Aware of some forensic techniques from his wife's textbooks at home, a fact, due to their abundance, Jorge attempted to cover up his crime and establish an alibi. He found a dark stretch of road without lights or video surveillance cameras and disposed of his wife's body in a drainage sewer there, thinking he could go unnoticed. The next morning, he drove to her place of work along the usual route as if he had taken Maria there just as he did every morning. The following day, he began to simulate an active search for his wife, calling her colleagues, acquaintances, and relatives. The criminal's lawyers delayed the trial as much as they could. They also attempted to throw the investigation off track. They insisted that all the evidence and witness statements were circumstantial, emphasizing that not a single piece of evidence unequivocally proved Georgie's guilt. Defense attorneys tried to get the detention changed to house arrest. They argued that Georgie himself was deeply depressed due to being accused of killing the woman he loved and the mother of his child. However, decisive evidence came from data obtained from Maria's phone. All this time, the device was in her husband's possession. On the first day after the crime, several messages were sent from it to different people in an attempt to create the appearance that Maria was still alive. Tracking all movements of the smartphone that day showed it was constantly in the same places as Jorge's phone. Despite this evidence, lawyers tried to turn it in favor of their client, claiming Jorge found his wife's phone and drove around with it searching for her. Yet no one could explain why he was sending messages from it or calling it from his own cell phone. Another proof of guilt was bruises and scratches on Jorge's body, found on the day of his arrest. These marks were photographed by experts and indicated that Maria clearly resisted. The most vivid was a scratch on his neck. Unfortunately, particles of Jorge's epithelium under Maria's fingernails couldn't be found because they were destroyed by fire. Despite many controversial points, the prosecutor asked for the maximum possible punishment for Jorge. Court hearings and proceedings were repeatedly postponed due to the raging worldwide pandemic. But in October 2022, Jorge was finally found guilty of his wife's brutal murder and sentenced to 50 years in prison. Although he maintained his innocence throughout, custody of little Alice was given to her maternal grandparents, who admitted their granddaughter now holds the main meaning in their lives. The case of Danilo Cavalcante. On July 3, 1989, a child was born in the municipality of Esto in the state of Maranhão, Brazil. The boy was given the common Portuguese name, Danilo. This child experienced a tough upbringing. He wasn't spoon-fed or comforted with bedtime stories. No one took him by the hand to school when he reached school age. Instead, Like many children in his impoverished neighborhood, he grew up on the streets. The environment for adults and children in Brazil's favelas is marked by oppressive poverty, low living standards, and high unemployment. All these factors contribute to a thriving street crime culture. When growing up in such conditions, amid dirt, poverty, and lack of basic human necessities, one's instincts for self-preservation kick in. People survive as best they can or choose to. Unfortunately, most often someone who has known only violence from childhood may take the same violent path since they know no other way. Our story today delves into horrific brutality and relentless obsession that can destroy lives. Such events unfolded recently. In 2019, Sarah Brando eagerly awaited the arrival of her younger sister Deborah and her two nephews, Ian and Yasmin, at the airport. After a failed relationship with her children's father, Deborah, who was 30 at the time, driven by a genuine desire to provide a better life for her children, moved from Brazil to Pennsylvania to live with her sister. The family quickly adapted to their new environment, enjoying their cozy home and improved living standards. Deborah Brando and her sister Sarah were inseparable. They worked together at a cleaning service and often stayed connected via phone calls throughout the day. Their lives were quiet and happy as they embraced their newfound circumstances in another country. However, an unexpected acquaintance altered their destinies forever. A compatriot who was 31 years old at that time. A trusting relationship swiftly developed between them. Danilo was attentive and kind to both Deborah and her children. Deborah fell in love with her Brazilian neighbor Danilo Cavalcante and believed she had found a dependable partner. After several months into their relationship, they rented a small house together and began living as one cohesive family unit. After some time, Danilo, whose temperament was often hot and emotional, began to lose interest in the apparent perfection of their family life. As he grew closer to Deborah, his jealousy and obsession intensified. Mistrust without basis gradually transformed into a need for total control over the relationship. Frequent conflicts erupted between the couple, often culminating in violence. Danilo would drink heavily every night and return home as a completely different person, almost like an angered animal. He demanded complete submission and obedience from Deborah, punishing her severely in front of their children when she resisted. Despite her strength and efforts to defend herself and protect her children, the situation became untenable for Deborah. Unable to endure such treatment any longer, she moved back to her sister's home. After numerous threats from Danilo, Deborah sought protection by going to the police and subsequently obtaining an order of protection from the court that prohibited him if she even considered ending their relationship permanently. Fearing for her safety, Deborah decided to investigate Danilo's background. She reached out to acquaintances in Brazil through social media and unearthed startling information about his past life and his reasons for coming to the United States. To her shock, she discovered that Danilo was not who he had claimed to be. On November 5, 2017 in Brazil, Danilo had fatally wounded a 20-year-old student named Walter Jr. Moreira dos Reis by shooting him 5 times near a restaurant in Figueroa for something as trivial as a car repair debt. Investigation revealed that the two men were friends before this tragic incident occurred. Following the crime, Brazilian authorities issued an arrest warrant after granting the prosecutor's office's request for preventive detention. However, Danilo managed to leave Brazil through Brasilia International Airport due to procedural disagreements within the judicial system that delayed registering this decision in the National Warrant Registry. This discovery left Deborah stunned as she realized how much danger she was truly in by merely being associated with Danilo Cavalcante. It wasn't until 7 months after the crime that Cavalcante entered Puerto Rico illegally. In June 2018, a warrant for his arrest was issued in Brazil. On entering Puerto Rico, Cavalcante obtained a fake ID and eventually settled in Chester County, Pennsylvania, where his sister lived. Upon discovering Danilo's true identity, Deborah issued an ultimatum: leave her alone, or she would reveal his identity. Unfortunately, this decision proved fatal. On the evening of April 18, 2021, Deborah was walking her children outside her house. The children were playing catch-up while Deborah chatted quietly with an elderly neighbor. When Danilo Cavalcante approached and pulled Deborah aside for a conversation, The neighbor looked on, but did not intervene. The discussion initially appeared calm. However, at one moment, Cavalcante produced 2 knives and attacked her. Deborah fell to the ground as he stabbed her multiple times. Despite her children's pleas for him to stop hurting their mother, he continued in a frenzy, inflicting a total of 38 stab wounds. A neighbor witnessing this brutal act attempted to administer emergency aid and stop the bleeding, while Deborah's daughter ran to get help and call emergency services. Deborah Brendo was rushed to a hospital but succumbed to her injuries. Meanwhile, Danilo Cavalcante fled Pennsylvania to evade capture and remained on the run for several hours until apprehended by Virginia State Police. He was extradited back to Pennsylvania and placed under arrest pending trial. On August 16, 2023, in Chester County, Danilo trial for first-degree murder commenced. The investigation revealed that had refused to accept the end of their relationship and had been intimidating Deborah through regular domestic violence since 2020. During the trial, Deborah's sobbing child testified, recounting repeatedly the terrifying events of that day. It took the jury only 15 minutes to convict Cavalcante guilty. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Following the verdict announcement, Cavalcante was transferred to Chester County Jail in Pocopson, where he awaited transfer to a federal prison. On August 31, 2023, around 9 a.m., an inmate managed to escape from Chester County Jail. Utilizing a chimney, he scaled the wall between 2 narrow hallways and ascended through the chimney to the roof. Avoiding the barbed wire fences, he broke free. Surveillance footage captured him in the tight space between 2 walls in the exercise yard. He used his arms and legs to ascend upward, eventually running across the roof. From there, he climbed over the fence and pushed through the barbed wire to gain freedom. Prison officials were well aware of vulnerabilities identified after Igor Bolt's escape and believed they addressed them adequately. Officials thought that adding barbed wire after a similar escape attempt by an inmate named Igor Bolter just months earlier would prevent any jailbreaks. Acting Warden Howard Holland stated that according to court documents in May, inmate Igor Bolter had climbed onto the roof of the jail and jumped to a less secure location, but was captured less than a mile from the prison within about 5 minutes. In response to this urgent matter, the prison was closed, initiating a massive search for Danilo Cavalcante, considered particularly dangerous. Alerts were issued everywhere. Danilo Cavalcante, age 33, with black hair and possibly armed and very dangerous. The escape of such a dangerous felon gained significant media attention. The search for this fugitive was broadcast daily across all media channels. The Pennsylvania State Police chief overseeing the search held regular press conferences and briefings, providing residents with precise information about this special operation. He urged residents not to stay on the sidelines, but to take an active role through vigilance and observation to help determine the perpetrator's route. And it worked. About a few hours after the escape, Danilo Cavalcante was spotted walking along a road about 2 miles of the prison. With the help of reports from local residents, Cavalcante was seen by camera in the early morning hours of September 2nd. Police set up a search perimeter around the area, securing roads and railroads that run through it to prevent Cavalcante's potential escape, and put up a $10,000 reward for any information leading to his capture. Authorities began searching within 2 miles of the jail in the heavily wooded area of Pocopson Township in Chester County. A local resident saw the fugitive in a creek bed just days after the escape, but he fled into the woods before police could find him. The search continued and the perimeter expanded after he spent about a week on the run. A security camera captured Cavalcante at Longwood Gardens, a popular botanical garden nearly 3 miles from the jail, just south of where law enforcement initially searched for him. There's a lot of ravines, tall fields, high grass, a lot of cover for a guy who is 5 feet tall and 120 pounds. Robert Clark, Deputy U.S. Marshal for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, stated on September 5th that in addition to tough terrain, searches had difficulty with extreme heat and humidity, lasting for several days. After a week of desperate searches for Cavalcante, the number of officers involved grew from 250 to almost 400. The search team has been strengthened not only in numbers, but also in equipment. Helicopters flying over began playing a recorded message from Cavalcante's Portuguese mother, begging him to surrender peacefully. The next morning, Cavalcante was spotted by a security camera on property located about 2 miles south of the prison. Police moved in and set up a new perimeter around this facility and Longwood, as well as nearby schools. These areas will be closed while search efforts continue. Police conducted an intensive search over several days until eventually, Longwood Gardens briefly reopened with limited access before being forced to evacuate and close again following another sighting of Caval. On September 7th, law enforcement doubled the reward for information leading to his capture from $10,000 to $20,000. After nearly a week of searching, tension was palpable. Locals knew a man convicted of murder was on the loose. Yet, authorities had not disclosed how Cavalcante escaped from prison. In Chester County, Philadelphia residents were instructed by police to lock all doors and windows, secure vehicles, and stay indoors. CBS News reported that 34-year-old Danilo Cavalcante escaped from a Pennsylvania prison. The intense search pressed on until a significant development occurred on September 9th. Cavalcante somehow managed to breach the search perimeter in Longwood Gardens. He was seen on a video intercom, standing on a porch of a former colleague's home near Phoenixville, almost 20 miles northeast of the search area. Cavalcante cleverly altered his appearance. He shaved and donned new clothes and remained undetected as he moved across the state. He stole a van from a local dairy store and drove it to Phoenixville with hopes of getting help and shelter from acquaintances. On the morning of September 10th, authorities discovered an abandoned stolen van with an empty gas tank in a field in suburban East Ant Mill. The search area then shifted to the northern part of Chester County. Cavalcante's movements once again prompted changes to the search perimeter on September 11th. As investigators continued their efforts, Cavalcante was listed on Interpol's most wanted list, and the reward for information regarding his whereabouts was increased further. That night, emergency services received an urgent call from a local resident who reported that a man matching Cavarcan's description had broken into his garage. In self-defense, the homeowner fired multiple shots and hit him 7 times. Surprisingly, Cavalcante managed to escape and stole a .22 caliber rifle with both scope and flashlight attachments. Police arrived swiftly at the scene and discovered Cavalcante's sweatshirt and shoes nearby. Once they confirmed his identity and recognized that this dangerous felon was now armed, local authorities urged residents in South Coventry to lock all doors and windows, secure vehicles, and stay indoors whenever possible. This fugitive remains particularly dangerous, and his escape has deeply concerned area residents. Several school districts even canceled classes as precautionary measures to ensure safety. On the day after Cavalcante was seen on surveillance video, police expanded the search and urged residents to keep their doors locked. A new search perimeter set up in South Coventry Township, which was tighter than before because authorities believed Cavalcante was now surrounded. The search continued throughout September 12th. Around 1 a.m. on September 13th, an aircraft with thermal imaging technology spotted Cavalcante in the woods. However, due to bad weather, the police had to wait until sunrise to approach, as the surveillance plane could not operate safely. The significant breakthrough occurred in the early morning hours of September 13th, when authorities found out that a security alarm went off just after midnight within the final search perimeter. According to Bivin, an officer of illicit drug enforcement, the aircraft using thermal imaging technology detected a heat signal around 1 a.m. shortly after the alarm was triggered. Ron Johnson, a retired Missouri State Highway Patrol captain, mentioned that technology played a major role in this operation. He said law enforcement faced many challenges for a long time, but managed to pick up the heat signal from a DEA spy plane just in time. At around 8 a.m. on September 13th, police found Cavalcante asleep with the rifle he had stolen from his home 2 nights earlier. Danilo Cavalcante, a dangerous criminal, tried to escape by crawling into thick undergrowth. However, a police dog named Yoda subdued him by biting his head and holding him until police arrived. Lieutenant Colonel George Bivin stated at a news conference that Yoda caused Cavalcante minor head injuries during his capture. Cavalcante was questioned by the police immediately after his capture. He revealed that he survived on watermelons and creek water and traveled only at night. He even admitted he almost got caught by an officer while hiding at one point. His plan was to steal a car and travel to Canada. Since returning to prison, Cavalcante has been charged with multiple crimes related to his escape, including burglary, trespassing, and theft. Following his capture, local and state officials, including Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, expressed gratitude to all law enforcement officers who assisted in the search for high-risk felon Danilo Cavalcante. Chief George Bivens, who led the search, discussed the multitude of challenges that law enforcement officers faced during the operation to locate Cavalcante. He highlighted the intense heat and thunderstorms that occurred in the area during the search. Additionally, he noted that each of the search perimeters was established in heavily wooded areas. The search team was composed of approximately 500 law enforcement officers, including Pennsylvania State Police, FBI, ATF, and U.S. Marshals, who thoroughly searched the area around the escape scene. In the wake of Cavalcante's escape, police set up a perimeter spanning several miles in each direction. The Chester County Jail Board, responsible for overseeing the jail, faced heavy criticism from local residents for their failure to prevent Cavalcante's escape. Residents pointed out that the jail had previously been given an opportunity to implement necessary security improvements after Igor Balti's attempted escape on May 19th. Those enhancements could have potentially prevented Cavalcante's escape since he used the same method as Bolt did. Following this incident, the prison has already terminated the prison guard, who was on duty during Cavalcante's September 7th escape. Prison officials stated that this guard had a chance to spot Cavalcante during his breakout. In response to public concern in days after capturing the fugitive, Chester County Jail announced they had installed a tin roof over the area, where Cavalcante scaled 2 walls to access and eventually escaped from the facility. Alongside this measure, various other security enhancements and improvements were also implemented. Clearly, there are questions that Chester County officials will need to address regarding how the suspect managed to escape, especially considering this prison's history, said Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. He emphasized how crucial communication and cooperation among all law enforcement agencies and local residents were during this extensive search effort. Thanks to these combined efforts, Danilo will now never go free again. Raymond Koh was a 62-year-old pastor in Petaling Jaya, Malaysia. He was the founder of Harapan Community, a non-profit organization that reached out to the poor, to single mothers, and to those affected by HIV. The organization also ran a reading center that tutored students and gave English lessons to adults. On February 13, 2017, Pastor Koh left his home to go see a friend before attending a full day of meetings. That day, Pastor Ko's wife, Susanna, did not keep her cell phone with her. Later in the day, when she finally looked at it, she had multiple missed calls from people asking where her husband was. He had missed several important meetings, which was highly out of character for the dedicated and punctual pastor. After consulting with a friend who was a lawyer, Mrs. Koh filed a missing persons report with police that night. She was questioned for more than 5 hours, an experience which she has described as traumatic. The missing persons report was quickly tied in with other reports that had been filed that day. 2 eyewitnesses reported seeing an abduction take place just 100 meters away from a police station. At the scene, authorities found broken glass and the license plate from Pastor Ko's car. Video surveillance footage showed that Pastor Koh was the victim of a large, highly coordinated abduction. At least 3 black SUVs, 2 light-colored cars, and 2 motorbikes formed the caravan that carried out the abduction. The 3 SUVs surrounded Pastor Ko's car and forced him to stop. Someone gets out of one of the white cars, apparently videotaping the attack. The pastor's car is largely obscured by a tree in the footage, but there appears to be a struggle, and the pastor may have rammed his car into one of the SUVs in an attempt to flee. A hatchback vehicle happens upon the scene and is ordered to reverse back down the road away from the other vehicles. It is chased down the road by one of the people on a motorbike. All of the vehicles, including Pastor Ko's, are then driven away. The entire incident took approximately 40 seconds. Pastor Koh has not been seen since, and his car has never been located. The individuals responsible for the abduction must have been surveilling Ko and followed him from his home, as he would not have normally have been on the road he was abducted on. On the morning of February 13th, Pastor Ko diverted from his normal routine to drive to a friend's house to surprise him. The pastor wanted to give his friend some bela kan, a Malaysian shrimp paste to take with him to Indonesia. If his abductors had simply decided to lie in wait along the pastor's normal route, they would not have been able to abduct him that day because he did not take it. Pastor Ko's family offered a reward in the case. The reward was originally a modest one, but they were eventually able to gather enough funds to increase the amount tenfold, bringing it to the equivalent of over $20,000 in US currency. 2 weeks after the abduction, Pastor Ko's son, Jonathan, filed a second police report. This report was made on the suspicion that in light of the lack of a ransom demand and the length of time Pastor Ko had been missing, he must have been murdered. At the end of March, Harapan community had to close its reading center. Pastor Ko was considered to be the spiritual center of the facility, but he was also the main solicitor of donations for it. Without his advocacy, the center had quickly run out of funding. The main motive suspected in Pastor Ko's abduction is religion. As a Christian, Pastor Ko was in a religious minority in Malaysia. Malaysia is a multi-ethnic country where numerous religions are practiced, but 60% of its population practices Islam, which is recognized as the state's official religion. While different religions are allowed to be practiced in Malaysia, attempting to convert Muslims to these religions is illegal in most Malaysian states. In 2011, Pastor Ko alleged in a press release that on August 3rd that year, the Selangor Islamic Religious Department raided a fundraiser his non-profit hosted in a church on suspicions that the event was trying to convert Muslims to Christianity. The department denied these claims in November 2017 during the inquest into Pastor Ko's abduction. Pastor Ko received a death threat through the mail after the raid, and Harapan community had to move their offices. Pastor Ko was not the only social activist to go missing around this time in Malaysia. 3 of his friends, who were also active in social causes, had also gone missing. Pastor Joshua Hilmi and his wife Ruth, as well as activist Omri Chemet, who founded the charity Perlis Hope, all went missing in November 2016. The rash of disappearances caught the attention of the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia, who opened their own inquiry into the disappearances at the end of 2017. Most of the testimony heard was critical of the police and their lack of progress in their own investigations. The inquiry was forced to come to a halt on January 17, 2018 when police made an arrest in the kidnapping of Pastor Ko. While an arrest in the case seems promising on the surface in this situation, it actually hampered the investigation. Under Malaysian law, the Human Rights Commission has to cease any inquiry it is making into a case when court proceedings begin against a suspect in that case. The man arrested, 31-year-old Lam Chong Nam, was a part-time Uber driver. In March of 2017, he had been arrested for trying to extort money from Pastor Ko's son in exchange for the pastor's release. Police cleared him of any actual involvement in the kidnapping, saying he had solely been trying to take advantage of the case to make money. The arrest sparked outcry amongst the groups who have been advocating for all of the missing social activists, who suspected that the arrest was made purely to halt the human rights inquiry that was publicly embarrassing the police. The inquiry was reopened in May of 2018 when a panel determined that the subject of the inquiry was not the same as the subject of the court case after hearing arguments from both the police and lawyers for the Po family. The inquiry being reopened caused a whistleblower to come forward with new accusations against the police. Police Sergeant Shamsiani Muhammad Daud initially approached Omri Shemat's wife, Noriati Moarifin, to tell her that her husband and Pastor Ko had been abducted as part of a black operation by Malaysia's special branch with the full knowledge of the Inspector General of the police. The motive for Pastor Ko's abduction was his alleged proselytizing of Muslims, something Pastor Ko's family has always denied he ever engaged in. However, the day before he was due to testify at the inquiry, Daud filed a police report saying he had never made these statements. The Human Rights Commission's inquiry was finally completed in December 2018. On February 13, 2019, Pastor Ko's wife Susanna appealed to Malaysia's Prime Minister to order a new investigation. Despite the amount of time since her husband was abducted, Susanna still holds out hope that her husband is not dead, but being held somewhere against his will and will in time be released back to his family. Blackburn family. On the morning of November 10, 2015, a car was parked outside a home on Sunnyfield Court. Davy Blackburn had returned from his daily gym workout. Just as he was about to step out of his car, a phone call delayed him for a few minutes. After concluding the call, Davy leisurely exited his vehicle and entered his house. Upon opening the door, he froze. His gym bag slipped from his hands. His wife lay on the living room floor in a pool of blood. Confused and deeply shocked, he rushed to her side for an examination, felt for a pulse, and immediately dialed emergency services. The young woman was still alive, though the living room was in disarray. Items scattered everywhere, and her purse emptied. Upstairs, their small child was crying. Emergency services arrived within 8 minutes. Police officers and investigators filled the house right after it got cordoned off. Amanda Blackburn was urgently transported to the hospital. Now let's pivot back to understand more about Amanda's background so we don't miss vital details of this tragic story. Amanda Grace Boers was born on July 31, 1987 in Muskegon, Michigan. She went to school in Indianapolis, Indiana until her family moved to Elkhart in 1995. There, she graduated from Elkhart Christian Academy in 2006 and later earned an associate degree from Pensacola Christian College in Florida by 2008. Amanda grew up in a deeply religious family, where Christianity and God's teachings were central tenets of their lives. Her father served as the lead pastor at First Baptist Church in Elkhart. Thus, church sermons and psalter were ingrained in her from childhood. She knew them by heart and honored them wholly. While other children raced toward adulthood's temptations like parties and first loves, Amanda's passion lay in her faith and her dream of serving Jesus faithfully. Amanda, a blonde-haired slim girl with a welcoming smile and genuine intentions. Not just beautiful on the outside, Amanda's thoughts and heart were pure. In every action, she displayed love for her neighbor. As a teenager, she took a vow of chastity, promising not to even kiss a man until marriage, and she always kept her word. Amanda's heart raced when she met Davy Blackburn, her true love. A native of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Davy studied religion at Southern Wesleyan University and came from a devout Christian family. The two met on a blind date at a Hawk Nelson concert organized by Amanda's sister and Davy's best friend. At the time, they attended different colleges, but spent every vacation together. Their relationship was purely platonic and free from earthly desires. They enjoyed walks together and shared intimate thoughts and favorite excerpts from church books. Their bond grew stronger as they found joy in simple things and joked sincerely with each other. Once before returning to school, they had a playful milkshake drinking contest, which Amanda lost. Davy teasingly called her Milk Girl, realizing then that she was the one he wanted to marry. The couple maintained a long-distance relationship for quite some time, constantly messaging via messengers, calling each other and chatting for hours. They spent every vacation together. Their respect for the seriousness of their relationship led them to see a psychologist to learn how to communicate properly. On August 1, 2008, Amanda and Davy Blackburn were married. After the wedding, Davy told friends that from the moment he kissed Amanda, he knew there was a special bond between them, a part of God's plan. For the first 4 years after their marriage, the Blackburns lived in South Carolina, where Davy served as an associate pastor at New Spring Church under Pastor Perry Noble. But the young man wanted more, and he suggested to Amanda that she move to Indianapolis to organize a new church for youth. Amanda was reluctant to leave her family and part with her loved ones. For a time, she struggled with the need to leave South Carolina. Eventually, she relented after her husband told her that God must have big things in store for them. In 2012, the Blackburns moved from South Carolina to Indianapolis to plant an independent high-profile church on the city's north side. The religious organization started by the young family focused on young people, as made clear in the weekly videos they posted on their website, which discussed relationship advice, conflict resolution, and biblical perspectives on intimate relationships. By 2014, the family had welcomed their firstborn child, Weston Blackburn. They were perfectly happy with their comfortable home on a quiet street and their favorite roles within the church. This church was regularly attended by many young people who listened to and believed in their sermons. The family lived in perfect harmony and understanding. However, everything changed on November 10, 2015. Ambulance crews arrived at the Blackburn residence in the 28-100 block of Sunnyfield Court around 8 a.m. The pregnant young woman was rushed to the hospital where she was hooked up to a ventilator and underwent several resuscitative. Sadly, Amanda died the next day along with her unborn baby. As it turned out, the family had been expecting a baby girl who was named Evie Grace at her burial. Her death sparked significant sympathy and prayers on social media over an extended period of time, as friends, family members, and strangers mourned Amanda with public posts. On November 11th, the day Amanda was officially declared dead, Davy released an official statement, saying that Amanda made it her life's calling to love and serve everyone. She dedicated her life to knowing Jesus as her personal savior, and through passing and legacy, countless others will come to a saving faith in Christ. I firmly believe that God remains good, turning our tragedy into triumph, and that indeed, the best is yet to come, Dave wrote. The murder of the pregnant woman was not only a devastating blow to the entire Orthodox family, but also a profound shock to the entire state. People demanded that those responsible for Amanda and her unborn child's death be brought to justice. In his first interview, Davy Blackburn recounted finding his wife Amanda injured and unconscious on the living room floor. She was partially unclothed, with her underwear lying nearby, and herself lying face down in a pool of blood. The pastor informed investigators that he had left the house around 6 a.m. to go to the fitness center for a workout. When he departed, he left the door unlocked. He mentioned this habit during his statement, saying, "You always do that too, don't you? You leave and don't lock the door." While it's hard to say whether securing the door would have prevented this tragedy entirely, it's evident that it made entry much easier for the criminals involved. Unfortunately, Amanda did not have precious time to contact emergency services, resulting in an attack that left her with 3 gunshot wounds, one of them being fatal. No arrests were made in the days immediately following this heinous crime. However, police quickly determined that Davy Blackburn was not involved in this horrific incident. Trial transcripts reveal additional details from Davy Blackburn's testimony, alongside accounts from witnesses such as Scott Floyd, an emergency medical paramedic from the Indianapolis Fire Department who arrived at their home following Davy's 911 call. According to Scott Floyd's testimony, upon arrival, they found Davy Blackburn outside at the end of the driveway with blood on his hands, but maintaining a very calm demeanor. Scott Floyd stated that Blackburn appeared not to fully comprehend what had transpired with Amanda when they reached him at their residence. Davy claimed he came home from the gym at about 7:30 a.m. and continued his phone call with his friend Kenneth Wagner in the driveway. He occasionally got out, strolled down the driveway, and peeked through the front door window to see if baby Weston was awake. He said he finished his call, entered his home at 8:10 a.m., and found Amanda lying face down on the floor. He thought she was sick or unconscious. He called emergency services at 8:22 a.m. Took him 12 minutes to make that call. In an emergency situation, 12 minutes is quite a long time. He repeatedly said he thought something had gone wrong with the pregnancy, and maybe she'd gotten dizzy and fallen. Did he not notice after 12 minutes that there was brain matter about 5 feet away from her body? Emergency room Dr. Scott Floyd testified that the blood on her head was coagulated, leading him to believe that the gunshot had occurred a couple of hours earlier, but those transcripts were not made public. Davy was asked if he had called anyone else after dialing 911. He said he called his father next. Defense attorneys did not cross-examine Davy Blackburn. Authorities corroborated his story with surveillance footage from the gym. Thus, he was not among the suspects. An autopsy conducted on November 12th showed Amanda suffered a gunshot wound to the back of her head. She also had a gunshot wound to her lower left arm that went through her biceps, and another one that entered and exited her upper back. Multiple scratches were found on her left cheek, along with a split lip and a knocked-out lower tooth. These injuries indicated a possible struggle between Amanda and her attacker. A thorough investigation was launched. CCTV footage from nearby streets was examined. Neighbors and family acquaintances were interviewed as well. One neighbor reported hearing gunshots about 35 minutes after Davy left the house. Another neighbor, Reginald Townsville, mentioned their street wasn't known for incidents like this and expressed shock by stating that the Blackburns didn't deserve this tragedy. Everyone thought highly of the Blackburn family. They were seen as wonderful and loving people by their community. Based on Amanda's injuries and the missing bank cards as well as MacBook bag, robbery seemed to be an initial theory during this investigation. On the morning of November 10, 2015, several emergency calls were made reporting home invasions. Various residences near Blackburn's home. Around 5:20 a.m., one woman reported waking up to find her cell, laptop, purse, and keys missing from her apartment. Her car was also gone from the parking. The sliding glass door to her apartment was. 3 hours later, another woman reported a burglary. Someone had broken through the patio screen and entered the house. According to police reports, for televisions, a MacBook Pro, a Tiffany pearl necklace, a pink women's sweater, a remote control, a bag of oranges, and bedding were missing from the residence. Just 5 minutes after that second call, another individual from Sunnyfield Court contacted emergency services. This time, it was Davy Blackburn. Lieutenant Richard of the Indianapolis Police Department stated that police were investigating potential connections between this homicide and the other burglaries in the same neighborhood that morning. The police have not disclosed details about the ongoing investigation to maintain its integrity. However, after obtaining images of possible suspects from one of the burglarized homes, they released these images to the public for assistance in identifying and helping with the investigation. Davy Blackburn expressed confidence that the police department was doing everything within their power to apprehend his wife's perpetrator. Investigators assured him that they had unprecedented support to continue their investigation and were optimistic that promising leads would soon help identify those responsible. Key clues instrumental in tracking down 3 suspects included a stolen pink sweater, cell phone records, and an ATM receipt. The receipt and sweater were discovered in a stolen Chrysler Sebring used during the robberies. Authorities recovered this vehicle on November 11th near Blackburn's home. The debit card listed on the receipt matched Amanda Blackburn's stolen card. Investigators obtained a warrant to examine ATM camera footage and discovered video showing the driver concealing his face with a stolen pink sweater. Police relied on DNA testing, surveillance footage, and witnesses' testimonies to identify those responsible for these crimes. The results from the DNA testing of the sweater confirmed that Jayon Watson was one of the suspects. Watson's identification marked the first significant breakthrough in the case, as indicated in the affidavit. Cell phone records were obtained because Watson's number was already in the database due to his parole for a prior burglary. Subsequently, Diana Gordon's cell phone records were also retrieved. These records demonstrated that both Watson's and Gordon's cell phones were present in the vicinity when the crime occurred. The phone records further disclosed that Gordon and Watson were near the Chase Bank, where Amanda's debit card was used on the day of the murder. Larry Taylor emerged as a critical piece of information when police examined surveillance footage from the area. This footage enabled them to identify Taylor's phone number and trace his address. In the subsequent days, reports surfaced, indicating that a firearm had been located near the Blackburn residence. According to police, an individual delivered this gun to the Broad Ripple Fire Department, claiming they had found it outside the couple's home. Crime lab technicians analyzed the weapon over 2 weeks of investigation and detective work. Police eventually charged 18-year-old Larry Taylor and 21-year-old Jayon Watson with Amanda Blackburn's murder. Another individual, 24-year-old Diana Gordon, who was suspect of burglary, was arrested for a parole violation and not charged with a felony. He did not enter Blackburn's home during the incident. The crime lab confirmed that a gun found near Amanda Blackburn's home was indeed used in committing the crime. All 3 suspects were taken into custody. During questioning, Larry Taylor admitted to shooting Amanda twice, explaining he acted out of fear she might scratch him after she jumped on him. After she fell over, he leaned down and shot her in the back of her head, subsequently watching her bleed to death. The criminal trio intended to rob the Blackburn house for money. They chose their target upon noticing that Amanda's husband had left their front door unlocked when he went to the gym. Inside, they confronted Amanda to prevent her from interfering. During this confrontation, Taylor struck her with a gun. Watson and Gordon saw the woman and decided it was time to leave. They already had the stolen bank cards, so they went searching for an ATM. After failing to withdraw $500 from one, they successfully obtained $1,400 from another. This is when CCTV captured them. They then headed back to the Blackburn house to pick up Taylor. In their absence, a struggle took place inside. Amanda, regaining consciousness after being struck, lunged at the intruder. He tackled her in response. Following this, Taylor placed the stolen debit cards in the accomplice's car, who was at an ATM during the crime. Upon their return, he confessed to shooting Amanda, according to court records. The Blackburn home was their third target on November 10th. Earlier in their first break-in, they stole a laptop, wallet, and car while the residents slept. Inside that home, they noticed a recording camera, but moved on regardless. Next, they broke into another house through a patio window and stole 4 televisions, a laptop, jewelry, a bag of oranges, and a pink sweater that later helped police identify them. Court documents detailed this evidence collected against the suspects. The crucial piece was Watson's DNA found on the pink sweater used to cover his face from surveillance as he tried withdrawing cash with Amanda Blackburn's bank card. Watson and Gordon cooperated with authorities in return for reduced sentences. Larry Taylor waived his right to remain silent and admitted being near the burglary scene but claimed confusion about his activities. Formal charges were brought by the county prosecutor. Larry Taylor faces 13 charges, including felony murder, after knowingly killing Amanda Blackburn. Jalen Watson is charged with felony along with multiple counts of burglary and theft. Diana Gordon, already in custody for parole violation, also faces burglary charges. Additionally, there was a fourth person aware of these crimes, but not actively participating in them. He was questioned and released. The Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department's Violent Crimes Unit worked with the gang unit and federal marshals to arrest Taylor. Police Chief Rick Height praised the cooperation that led to the arrest. The detectives worked tirelessly all day, without sleep, to solve the murders in the city. With assistance from Assistant U.S. Attorney Josh Minkler and Prosecutor Terry Curry, justice was served. Because the victim was pregnant, prosecutors said they might consider filing additional charges related to the fetus. Even though the woman's underwear had been removed and her shirt pulled up, they stated there was no evidence to support rape charges. Larry Taylor's first trial took place in December 2021, but it ended abruptly when it was discovered that a juror had shared information about the case with other jurors. This disclosure interrupted the trial, leading to a mistrial being declared. The final trial took place in October 2022. Jury selection was more thorough this time. Over 100 individuals were considered as potential jurors, each having to fill out a 16-page questionnaire for attorneys to evaluate if a fair verdict could be reached. Larry Joe Taylor received an 86-year sentence at the Indiana State Correctional Institution for Amanda Blackburn's murder and for additional charges related to a home burglary. Diana Gordon and Jalen Watson agreed to plea deals and testified against Larry Taylor during the trial. Both received sentences ranging from 20 to 35 years in prison. Jalen Watson and Larry Taylor are currently incarcerated in the Marion County Jail. A murder conviction in Indiana can result in a prison sentence of 45 to 60 years, with some cases punishable by life imprisonment or even the death penalty. Prosecutors filed a motion to enhance Larry Taylor's sentence, potentially adding up to an additional 20 years since Amanda Blackburn was pregnant at the time of her death. Davy Blackburn, Amanda's husband and a church pastor, expressed relief that those responsible for his wife's death have been apprehended and will no longer pose a threat to anyone else. Amanda Blackburn's death has touched the hearts of many people, including the chief executive. Her funeral at a Christian church was attended by more than 2,000 individuals. Among those in attendance was Governor Mike Pence. The resident church has set up a donation page to assist with Amanda Blackburn's funeral and medical expenses. Davy Blackburn expressed hope for a judicial system that will wisely handle those responsible for his family's immense pain. Remarkably, he has consistently reported that he has chosen to forgive Amanda's killers. "I was very relieved to learn of the arrest," he told reporters. "Although everything inside me wants to hate, be angry, and despair, I choose the path of forgiveness, grace, and hope." Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.